if you're not there, your competitors are going to be there. And whatever interest you just worked so hard to generate is now going to play right into their hands.
Today, I'm speaking with Aaron Goldman, a true advertising forward marketer and CMO of Mediaocean, an A to Z platform for omnichannel advertising.
How do you think about second screen in that mix?
Tell your story on the main screen, and then on the second screen, have your call to action. And it has to be something that's easy for people to do, because remember, they're only distracted for a few more seconds. So it has to be something easy. We have more than one screen in front of us, and it's those kind of emotional connections that really pop out from the day-to-day that will have a lasting impact for a brand. And more importantly, turn what would have been otherwise just a great opportunity to create some awareness into hopefully some sort of direct response action that the customer you're trying to reach can take.
The new announcement, and I'd love to get your take on it, is that Netflix is going to have a lower priced ad-supported tier. What are your thoughts on that?
Now, of course, what's very cool with the rise of the ad formats that are emerging, because it's television content being delivered digitally, you can do more in that ad space. So there's other opportunities, because if you're signed in through a streaming provider, there's other types of actions that you can take and other types of targeting that can be done. So it doesn't have to be a one-size-fits-all message like the Super Bowl is, where everyone sees the same ad at the same time.
How are you thinking about the customer you want to reach?
We are trying to...
Welcome to Top CMO. I'm chatting with Aaron Goldman, CMO at Mediaocean. And Aaron, you're an omni-channel marketer. You play on the B2B side, but you're helping companies on the B2C side. So you do all of that. First of all, has digital marketing just eaten up all of marketing? His famous quote was that software is eating the world. Is digital marketing eating the marketing world?
It is eating the marketing world. I would stop short of saying all, though. I don't think it's fully taken over, nor do I think it will ever fully take over. I think there is still and will remain a role for non-digital forms of media, as long as non-digital forms of living in the world exist.
Okay, sure. So what are the things, and take me through, maybe to start off with, how do you think about if you're looking at a programmatic digital ad buying campaign on one hand, and then you're looking at a Super Bowl ad on the other hand, right? So totally different mediums. What's the purpose of each, and how do they coexist in one media plan in your estimation? Let's say you're a big B2C consumer brand.
Yeah, and I think you'd have to be a large brand to be considering as part of your mix, both the Super Bowl ad and a programmatic ad. So good problems to have. That's a decision point for you. But they do play both very different but very important roles. I mean, with the Super Bowl, it is the last bastion of mass media, where all attention is tuned in to one place at the same time. There's really nowhere else where you can get that kind of reach and scale all in one fell swoop. So it's become this sort of tentpole for advertisers and marketers to put out a new message, launch a product, make a big splash, build momentum. It happens towards the beginning of the year. So for a lot of people, it's kind of the launching pad for their annual campaigns and plans. And what that does, though, and what's really important for anyone considering it, is you have to think of that as part of an ongoing approach. It's not a one and done. You're not going to just spend the $6 million for a 30-second spot and then hope that, cross your fingers and hope that did the trick.
So if your ad budget is $6 million, you're going to need a bit more. If you buy the Super Bowl spot, it can do some things for you, but it's not a magic bullet to reach a lot of people, and then you're done.
That's correct. Yes. And so if you think about both in the moments around, because, while we're all watching the Super Bowl or really any television event for that matter, the odds are you've got another device, in your hand or nearby. Yes, the Super Bowl is one of those rare times where people stay tuned in for the commercials because they know they're going to be amazing. But even still, you're, tweeting about what just happened in the game, or that funny ad you just saw, or you're scrolling through your social feeds, whatever the case is, texting your friends. And so having that kind of surround sound effect as an advertiser is an important part of the strategy. So complementing that Super Bowl buy with the types of programmatic ads that are an important part of the mix, with advertisements on social media, et cetera, and then extending the shelf life. And so making sure then that you've got an ongoing presence in front of your target audience, right? The Super Bowl reaches so many people, 100 million people all tuned in at once. that's not going to necessarily, for most brands, they have a more specific audience or customer set than that broad reach there. And so then being able to use things like programmatic that can really help you be specific in who you're reaching when you're reaching them, and then extending that out and building out the key moments that happen in the days and weeks and months after the Super Bowl become an important part of this ongoing, always on omnichannel strategy.
So do you advise and do you think about now, having what you alluded to, like a second screen strategy, that you have your primary screen, but what are you doing on a second screen or some other device? And sometimes people think of omnichannel in different ways. Like most traditionally, it's like, okay, we have multiple channels. But the idea is, do we actually have multiple channels running concurrently at the same time, which is where second screen comes in. So where do you think for B2C marketers that who are thinking about either broadcast and think traditional, big like the Super Bowl, or they're thinking about a different form of broadcast, streaming, OTT, something else, how do you think about second screen in that mix right now when you're results oriented, you're trying to make things happen, drive actual business metrics, and now you're like, okay, I just did this big splashy buy, now I got to think about a second screen too?
Yeah, it's a massive opportunity and a massive imperative. You have to be controlling the second screen. Otherwise, you're spending all this time and money and effort on the big screen to then just drive people straight in the hands of your competition. Because when they turn to their phone and they're maybe searching some of the keywords that they saw in the ad, or they're just, again, could be scrolling through social or visiting a website or playing in an app, if you're not there, your competitors are going to be there. And whatever interest you just work so hard to generate is now going to play right into their hands. And so there's a lot of opportunity to use that second screen as part of that kind of surround sound strategy. We can do things like sync ads so that when your ad runs on air, we can use that as a timestamp and have for like in the 2 minutes after the ad airs, we can have your ad run on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snap, Pinterest. So no matter which of those platforms someone's turning to, we can leverage things like if it's the Super Bowl example, in-game moments. Every time there's a touchdown, when the halftime show starts, if there's even down to like a lost fumble, by the home team, these are all triggers that you can then use to set up an ad. There was a great example, a campaign we ran with P&G for Old Spice. And Von Miller, the Denver Broncos, was one of their spokespeopeople. And anytime he had a sack in a game, that would then trigger a set of creatives that we had queued up, where he was, in the image in the ad, doing sort of like a celebratory sack dance, and then it had a very light branded touch for Old Spice. But that's the kind of stuff that's going to stop people, scrolling in their tracks, because we're all multitasking, we're distracted. Inherently by the fact that we're talking about the second screen, we have more than one screen in front of us. And it's those kind of emotional connections that really pop out from the day-to-day that will have a lasting impact for a brand. And more importantly, turn what would have been otherwise just a great opportunity to create some awareness into hopefully some sort of direct response action that the customer you're trying to reach can take. And that's where, of course, that second screen comes into play.
Well, yeah. And do you find that, I think to use like the Von Miller, sack example, kind of a nice moment. It's a connection with your audience. Maybe it's a moment where they're sort of, you can kind of connect your brand to the emotion they're experiencing. If they're the home, they're the home team, they're excited about this. Is this just for general branding, or awareness, or can this be used to drive an actual message? Can you get someone to buy something off of Von Miller's sack? Or take some action, or sign up, or download something? Do you find that brands are doing that successfully now, as opposed to the general branding kind of by association that they maybe would also want to do, or at least the biggest budget ad buyers would want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. We see a lot of success for that with app installs as kind of a primary objective for a campaign, where you might have something happen in a game. There might be an in-game moment, or you might have run a commercial on the big screen. But on the main screen in the television ad, you don't have the opportunity to help people take that next step other than you give them some directions to do. We can't all do what Coinbase did and literally just have a QR code sort of bouncing around the screen like that. That's one way to do it. Another way is tell your story on the main screen, and then on the second screen have your call to action. And it could be, it has to be something that's easy for people to do, because remember, they're only distracted for a few more seconds. So it has to be something easy, like an app install, some sort of like native.
They're not going to be filling out a long like order process, an order form, pick their shipping method, do all this kind of stuff. So it's got to be something that they can connect with faster, that then leads them further down the path where you might be able to hit that order form later, just not like while they're watching the big game.
You got it. Now, of course, what's very cool with the rise of streaming and OTT and CTV, connected television, I just threw a whole bunch of acronyms out there. But the ad formats that are emerging, because it's television content being delivered digitally, you can do more in that ad space. So it doesn't have to be just a clunky QR code bouncing around. There's other opportunities, because if you're signed in through a streaming provider, there's some information, you have an account set up, you can, potentially save things to view later. There's other types of actions that you can take and other types of targeting that can be done. So it doesn't have to be a one size fits all message like the Super Bowl is, where everyone sees the same ad at the same time. So that's really a cool opportunity that brings that sight, sound, and motion, the high impact of television with the targeting and direct response nature of digital.
Let's talk about Coinbase's famous sort of dancing, bouncing QR code for the Super Bowl. Overrated or underrated? And are we going to see more advertisers either A, trying to put more direct response into a high profile example like that, or B, taking more chances and risks to try to do something different that might not have huge creative production value, but might just have the kernel of an interesting idea?
Yeah. So on the scale of overrated to underrated, I would say was perfectly rated. I mean, it got a lot of attention. I think it was a very creative outside the box example, and it did what was intended, which was both create buzz and create direct response. And that's really hard to do. From what we learned after the game was that apparently the site was crashed from so many people, snapping the code. I think they said they got about 20 million snaps on the code. If you figure about 100 million people watching the game, that's a 20% response rate. You don't see that in pretty much any form of advertising these days. And so it both got you to stop and take pause, because it was surrounded by, all these other very high production quality types of commercials. And you see this, and then of course you get the opportunity to sign up and get free crypto, which back at the time the ad aired was a much more compelling proposition maybe than it is now, given what's happened with the crypto market. But putting that aside, if their objective was to both get people aware of Coinbase, and also then into get some information and get them into opening up an account and starting to make some transactions from both of those standpoints, it was incredibly effective. And it did get a lot of buzz and attention. And so that's why I think it was rated properly. If it was one, there were, the creative ad people, sort of panned it as being, not the best storytelling and such, but for what it was trying to do, I thought it was very effective.
Well, and in our formula, when we do for work as an agency, our formula is often, we want things to be simple. We want things to be surprising, and we want things to be significant. So simple and surprising, absolutely. Now, can you drive the significance of that to mean something more? But it's interesting when you're in a competitive set at the Super Bowl, then surprise might be doing lower production value. It's like if everyone's filming Die Hard, maybe you should film Blair Witch Project.
I think that's right. And Reddit had done that the year before. They ended up buying like a 5-second ad at the last minute, and you could you saw something sort of flash on your screen, and then it got people to stop, pause, rewind. Hey, what was that? Or go to social media to see what was that thing that I missed. And of course, if you saw it, it was like a screenshot, and it basically said, hey, we don't have time to produce an ad, but this will have to do. And that was it. It got a lot of buzz that way. So to your point, going against the grain sometimes can be very memorable.
Well, and there's a whole cottage industry, just to kind of finish up the Super Bowl topic, around ads that don't actually air on the Super Bowl that are tied in to the Super Bowl, right? Very kind of famous ads. And I'm remembering the ones, the one from, gosh, it's the Australian beer hired, gosh, I should look it up here real quick, but kind of famous ads that like are sort of based on, we almost took the Super Bowl ad out. There's a whole cottage industry in those too.
Yeah, absolutely. The advertising industry just had its big creative festival called the Cannes Lion Festival in Cannes, France. And every year they award the most compelling work. And a lot of these are ads that maybe only ran once or twice. They weren't part of a big campaign.
They're designed for viral marketing value. That's the purpose.
And, in a lot of ways, that's an effective strategy. You just have to be clear about what's my objective in doing this. Is it to make a point? Is it to win an award? Or is it actually to drive business? And there's a place for all of those in the portfolio, in the marketing portfolio.
And I'm thinking of the Newcastle beer ad with Anna Kendrick. And the line I always love in that is like, I think she says like, am I Super Bowl ad hot? I don't know about that. Well, maybe, I don't know. So in some line like that, which always makes me smile. So we've talked about these tentpole moments in marketing. Super Bowl is an obvious one, but I want to move over from the B2C side to the B2B side and talk about something that comes up sometimes with our clients that look for these tentpole moments. One of the ones we get is happened multiple times where a client will come to us, they're a B2B marketer, and they'll be like, we want to take out a full page ad in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, right? We have this new positioning, this new brand. Let's take it out. Let's sort of get our message out there. We have this moment. What do you think? The full page New York Times ad, or you'll see it, you'll see it also in moments of crisis, right? I think Uber had a famous one where they were going through a lot of challenges about their culture and said, we're 100% committed to changing this. They took out the full page ad. So what about for a B2B brand, these tentpole mediums like, and even in not a lot of people looking at maybe the print version of the New York Times or Wall Street Journal now. I know they have digital versions of the full page ad as well. What do you think about that as a strategy for B2B marketers?
I think it can be effective, but not as a one-off. Again, to same to a Super Bowl ad for B2C, like there's no silver bullet. You just do this one thing and you're good to go. It can be as the start of a launch or addressing an important issue. It can be a great rallying point. And I think it actually has merit and value beyond just the external customer facing or prospect inbound generating aspect of it, but also in the internal galvanizing of your team, your company, your stakeholders.
It's a rallying point. If you're going to have this moment, you have to rally together. This is a big moment and it's a demarcation. It's a line that says, we're here, we arrived, the brand is launched, we're doing it. All of those things could be important.
Yeah. And, once you get that deadline, once the buy is placed and it's happening, gosh darn it, there's a line in the sand.
Okay.
Now. We better be ready. And so it can move everyone en masse towards whatever this next big thing that you're hoping to have for your business to become.
And how do you think about, your customers, your clients are B2C companies, but obviously you're engaging with them on a B2B basis. So how do you think, and how do you, how does your own marketing reflect what you're preaching to your clients and customers? You have very large clients and customers. How do you leverage this omnichannel approach for your own marketing? How are you thinking about the customer you want to reach?
Yeah, I'm in a very unique position. I would say fortunate in some ways, not fortunate in others, in that I am my target customer. We are trying to communicate to other CMOs and talk to them about our software and why they should choose ours to help power their advertising. And so I have an innate insight into the mind of a CMO because I am one. It's again, fortunate and unfortunate to be the target market myself. I know if something's going to pass muster with me, then it has a good chance of also passing muster with other CMOs. What do I mean by pass muster? Well, get me to, stop scrolling through my feed and actually pay attention. Further from there, engage, tap, click, buy, whatever the case is. If if the opportunity is one that might get me to do it, I know there's a good chance it might get my cohorts. The challenging or not so fortunate aspect of it is marketers can sniff out the BS. I mean, you can't come with buzzwords and they're a tough, discerning audience. And so you really have to be on top of your game. You can't be lazy about what you're putting out because they do this for a living and they can just as easily tune you out because they know what to be looking for and when and how things can be avoided.
How would you characterize, because you have a unique vantage point, CMOs as a group? Meaning, what types of CMOs out there? I mean, you have people who come up from different tracks into the ranks, right? There's some that come up from like a real branding perspective. They're very conscious of a brand. There's others who came up from more of a product perspective or something like that. And they kind of came over to the marketing. They're very aware of, how the product and the marketing need to align. There's others who are just, they grew up in either performance marketing or direct marketing or digital. They're very aware of like, what are my unit economics on the marketing of this and what we're driving. So how do you think about like the range of CMOs and categorize them just so maybe we can have a better sense of sort of the types and the categories that exist for all of us who plan this?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely no one typical persona to the point you're making. People come into this role from a number of different avenues. And I think to paint them all with one brush is doing them a disservice and frankly, doing yourself a disservice as someone trying to reach them because they are going to have different experiences and different motivations and frankly, be at different stages. I think, it's more about the type of business, size, scale, vertical industry, location, product. Those are the things that will help you complete that picture. All that being said, I think you can be effective as a CMO coming from really any walk of life and any set of business experiences. What you then bring to the table then needs to be complemented by others who have other complementary experiences so that you can then play to your strengths and then bring in the folks who are going to be able to fill in potentially your gaps, your blind sides, et cetera. So I've seen great CMOs who come from the product world and then, surround themselves with people who have more sales or maybe more classic marketing experience. Vice versa, I've seen great CMOs come in from sales roles. Actually, I began my career in sales and I think for B2B, it gave me a really keen understanding of what it takes to be on the front lines, communicating a value proposition to a very discerning audience and how you can break through, build trust, and ultimately compel someone to action. And that's translated well into my role in marketing and my career because I have that empathy, not just for the end customer, but also for my sales team that's on the front lines trying to communicate with them.
Sure. Well, and maybe a little bit more empathy for usually the classic back and forth is, marketing says, sales couldn't close a lead you gave them to save their life. And then sales says, marketing is giving me crap leads. And of course, then customer success comes along and says, both of you guys don't know what you're doing because I'm not getting a good customer that I can service as well. So of course, well, in terms of what's trending right now, we've talked a lot about traditional broadcast. We've talked about the Super Bowl. Obviously, streaming, the rise of streaming disrupted a lot. And really, the people leading the way on that were Netflix. Since then, a lot of the major content holders have created their own streaming service. Then more recently, Netflix has really struggled. So the new announcement, and I'd love to get your take on it, is that Netflix is going to have a lower priced ad-supported tier. They're partnering with Microsoft to actually serve those ads, passing up a Google or a Comcast. What are your thoughts on that from really the big disruptor in the space that kind of got everyone focused on the streaming world, now having struggles and now trying to bring advertising back into a medium where that was famous for not having it?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly exciting. First, I'll just say that as someone who's worked in advertising for over 20 years and had to, listen to the people tell me, advertising's days are numbered. Everything's just going to be subscription only. It's gratifying to know that there's some longevity here, and I think the point is that these things can and should coexist, and we need to give consumers choice. Some consumers are going to want to and can afford to pay to have other content delivered in an ad-free experience. Others won't be able to. And the hope, of course, is that your advertising is good enough that it's not like a bad choice and that a consumer, has to suffer for making.
That it's like the Superbowl, that you want to stay and you want to watch because it's actually content you actually want to see as well.
And we have a good chance to do that with streaming because you can use a lot of the things we've learned from digital in terms of understanding who the audience is, because they're logged into the platform, because we know what else they've watched, because potentially there's other data points that we can build to complete the picture, and because we can serve a different ad to each person individually. That, to me, are all the elements of great advertising that doesn't just annoy consumers, but actually adds value to them. It offers them, products and services that maybe they didn't know they needed, or if they knew they needed it, they get a better deal on it because now they've seen your latest promotion. And further, with streaming, there's that opportunity, because it's the digital platform, to enable them to take that next step. And it's not just, like in the old days of TV ads where you try to have them memorize the phone number with your jingle so that you hope they call, later that day. So I think incredibly exciting. I think if you think about the portfolio approach that you now need to take as an advertiser or marketer to this space, it's about having your broadcast television, again, if it's right for your business and you can afford it. You have your streaming. You also have digital video and social video, are really important components of the mix. And what I think a lot of people lose sight of is that each of those channels, if you want to think of them as channels, or opportunities to engage with consumers, are very different. You can take the same idea, the same theme, the same sort of spirit of a campaign, but you really have to adapt it differently. What do I know about this person watching on Netflix that's different about when they're watching a 15-second video on TikTok? And how do I adapt the creative to fit that experience, and think about differently what type of call to action is appropriate for someone who might be on TikTok versus someone who might be on their couch watching Netflix. And what we want to do is enable those, bring those opportunities to life in a way that allows for a deeper engagement between the customer and the brand. And then ultimately, if you can do that, then the provider of it, the Netflixes of the world who have created this new opportunity, are going to be able to sustain their businesses for quite a long time.
Sure. And I think what that also means is you have to have a clear understanding on each channel or each medium about what the purpose is of that channel. And I'll give you an example. I mean, we're engaging in a podcast right now. We have people listening to this podcast, and if people are listening to a podcast, what kind of medium is that? Well, they might, some set and you're listening now, so you can think about what are you doing right now. Some people might be, really focused on, they're just sitting down like, I'm going to listen to the podcast, but other people might be going for their run. They might be working out. They might be the kind of thing you leave in the background, and you're kind of doing other stuff. And then you come back and say, oh, Aaron said something really interesting. What was that again? Let me go back and hear that again. Right. So it's a little bit more of we're in a medium now. It's a little bit more of a passive medium. It might be doing other things. So this is a good medium for building a relationship over time. It's a longer format. They might not be focused all the time. So we've got to utilize that. And then as part of the marketing mix, if we had some other channel that we were doing, it might serve a different purpose. But we ought to be clear and maybe not just say that like, oh, every channel is brand awareness that we're trying to do. Every channel is this, because they can all fit together. And that was one of the experiences I had doing a lot of work for Anheuser-Busch and Budweiser, where what they care about is their marketing mix, what's the most cost-effective way to do this objective, right? Is this going to cost me X amount per 1,000 over here, or can I do it more effectively over there? So how does one think about that? Mature companies, marketers that spend millions of dollars generally have some sense of this over time. What if you're new? What if you're fast growing? What if you're a startup? What if you're just coming into like thinking about TV, broadcast, or streaming, or maybe higher end digital video for the first time? How do you figure out what your purpose is for each medium?
Yeah, great question and great point behind the question. And ultimately, I think it comes back to taking a unique approach to each situation. A lot of people, the word omnichannel gets thrown out. And as we've talked about, it's not just doing the same thing on every channel. It's making sure that you have a presence on every channel. That presence may be different. Again, you may not be able to afford a paid presence on certain channels, but that doesn't mean you can't be creating your own video or audio content and distributing it through whatever means are available. If you have a new to market opportunity, and whether it's product, service, whatever type of business you're in, there are so many easy ways to get in, test, and learn. You may not be buying ads on the Superbowl anytime soon, but you can buy TV quality ads through the same networks that broadcast the Super Bowl. They have other opportunities that are much more accessible now and are sold in ways that feel like a digital type of buy. And that's, even like Hulu is a great example of, broadcast quality content, easily accessible, and you can get in the game and test. TikTok, Snap, Pinterest, even LinkedIn, even if you're B2C, by the way, LinkedIn can be a great place to advertise because you have a really engaged audience. And these types of things, you can get in the game very quickly, very cheaply, figure out what's working, and then just scale up from there. And again, my always advice is to continue to test, learn, let the data tell you what's happening, be intentional about the goals you're setting, set different goals for each of these different channels and apertures. And then whatever is working, just rapid follow on, do more, continue to get better. And ultimately you'll find yourself in a place where you see what works, you see what doesn't, and you can be building momentum from there.
And I'd like to finish up with the first thing is a lightning round that I think speaks to your background. You're the CMO of Mediaocean now. You came to Mediaocean because you were the CMO of another company that was acquired called 4C. From that, you have a lot of background in sort of social media, social platforms, and social channels. So I want to kind of do a lightning round with you and ask you, overrated or underrated for these channels, and how do you approach it? So let's start with the first one, kind of the granddaddy at this point, Facebook. In the current era, overrated or underrated, and how do you approach it?
I would say underrated, which I think will surprise people because it's been around for a long time. It's still so massive. But I think because people have started to focus on many other platforms from an advertising standpoint, it's created new opportunities on Facebook that weren't available before. And you can reach a lot of people in a lot of creative ways using the platform. And it may not be, the hot one that has a lot of buzz, but you can make a big impact by using the tools they have available.
Okay. Well, and then those same tools can be used for the second platform I'll throw out here, which is Instagram, owned by Facebook, famously bought the biggest threat at the time to them to kind of neutralize that threat. Instagram grew tremendously under Facebook's watch. Now it's really kind of ground central for a lot of influencer marketing. So Instagram, overrated or underrated, and how do you approach it?
Underrated. Not enough people realize how much you can do on Instagram. Instagram has come so far from just being a place where you share videos, photos, etc. You're doing commerce there now. And I think that's the biggest opportunity for as we grow. If you look at some of the comps from China, for example, with like a WeChat, I think between Instagram and some of the other assets Meta now has, they can create a platform that has the entertainment, the messaging, and the commerce all in one. And I think Instagram's at the core of that strategy.
And then Facebook tried to acquire Snapchat. They were unsuccessful at that, famously rebuffed from doing that. Snapchat goes out and builds a lot of buzz. Some of the shine rubs off a little bit with the rise of some other platforms we'll say in a second here. But Snapchat now, overrated or underrated, and how do you approach Snapchat?
Underrated, and you may start to see a theme, but I do believe that none of these platforms have people have maxed out the opportunities with. And I think in the case of Snap, what they have in terms of the way that people use it, some of the features like map and how people interact with the people and the world around them as they get more into the VR space, and as people get more comfortable with those types of applications, there's going to be a lot of ways where they can turn that engagement into something really cool and actionable for brands and businesses that they haven't done yet. It stops short of the full vision of the metaverse that Meta, Facebook and Instagram have. There's something in between, and I think Snap has a great opportunity there, and brands do alongside it.
And then Snap really becomes the hot platform everyone's talking about. But then comes along TikTok, and TikTok starts pulling from what kind of was some attention directed to Snapchat, gets shifted over to TikTok. It becomes a juggernaut in its own right. So TikTok now, overrated or underrated, and how do you approach it?
It's underrated. And from that standpoint, I'll speak solely just based off of the advertising opportunity. I think for influencer type marketing, for just using it as an organic source of creating content and engaging audiences, there's a lot of traction and opportunity. I think from an advertising perspective, it's been underrated. It's for the share of time and attention that it's capturing among a very elusive audience. It needs to be a bigger part of people's media and marketing plans. And I think we'll start to see that over the next couple of years. I think probably the biggest mistake people think about when thinking about Snap in their, TikTok in their marketing mix is they think of it as a social platform because they're used to, as we kind of work through this progression, this was sort of the evolution of social. It's an entertainment platform. And in a lot of the same ways that there's an opportunity for some of these other companies to broaden themselves into being these fully immersive places where commerce, entertainment happen congruently. TikTok's got all those elements, and it's got the momentum right now. And so it's still underrated for the time being.
And what about one sometimes that has been a big, well-known big player, but never quite got all of the buzz that all these other platforms did? I'm talking about Pinterest. Where does Pinterest fall in the mix? Talked about in Silicon Valley in San Francisco, where it's based, is kind of always around, but is never quite making the headlines. Pinterest, overrated or underrated, and how do they approach it?
Pinterest is underrated, and I think that's because to your point, it occupies this position that's unlike its peers. I think of it as sort of right in the middle of the classic purchase funnel, right? If at the top is, big brand awareness, at the bottom is direct response. Pinterest is the place where interest, inspiration, those types of things happen where you may or may not have recognized a need or be aware of a brand, but it turns you on to something, a project, a place to go, an activity to do, and a meal to cook, and then starts to give you some of those elements to put together and inspires you then to go further down and take that action. I think of what the ingredients that Pinterest has as being the kind of building blocks of good marketing, but they don't benefit from the obvious applications of how people think about mass marketing and maybe bottom funnel. And that's why it's underrated and has big opportunity.
And finally, LinkedIn. LinkedIn thought of as a place for, business to business connections and be in networks. But certainly those who market to certain types of businesses to B2B customers are highly involved in LinkedIn, typically. It can be a great source of leads. But beyond that, LinkedIn as an advertising platform, as a marketing platform, overrated or underrated, and how do you approach it?
I would say big time underrated. I think a lot of people have formed an opinion of LinkedIn as a professional social network that it's certainly launched as, but has become much more over the years. And by the way, even the fact that it has remained largely professional, as evidenced by, the posts where maybe someone posts something about their personal life and then gets, panned in the comments, hey, this isn't Facebook, what are you doing? Those edge cases aside, the fact that people are gathering around this platform as a place to learn and share ideas loosely related to our professions or what's happening in the world. There are so many signals in there that as a marketer, you can then harness to be able to craft a message. there's a scale, of course, of how many people are on it. But then when you start to see whether it's between hashtags or keywords or the companies they work for, the regions they're located, all of those things are elements you could put together when you're running an advertising campaign, that it doesn't matter if you're, selling B2B software or deodorant, you're going to be able to know who you're trying to reach. And the odds are those people are all on LinkedIn. And if you can find the right way to thread the needle with a creative message, it doesn't feel out of place in a professional setting, you can capture a lot of opportunity and convert it into business.
And of course, a lot of these aren't silos either. So maybe you engage someone and you find them on LinkedIn and then you retarget them where it's a little bit more cost effective on Facebook to stay top of mind. So none of these necessarily have to operate. And to your point earlier, these all might be operating in the context with your other omnichannel approach, with the streaming ad that's running, with the, hey, if you can afford it, the Superbowl ad, with other things. So I think sometimes people get overwhelmed by how do I understand and utilize these platforms as they're intended, and then sometimes forget that they're actually can all be interrelated too as well. And they might have a different purpose. They have a different cost profile. They have a different ability to target. And if you can use them in conjunction with with each other, so as you can accomplish something that you can't just accomplish on any one on its own.
Exactly.
So to wrap up, final question, which is we have a lot of listeners who want to be CMOs. And I don't mean a wannabe. I mean, they want to be. They're on the track to do it maybe in the next 5 years. You've talked about having different types of intelligences, whether that's traditional IQ or AQ, adaptive, or CQ, you've called creative, or EQ, emotional. So to be an effective CMO in your experience, both from your own experience and the CMOs you interact with, how do these intelligences play a role? And what do you recommend for the person who's on the track to CMO level, not quite there now, about how they can use them to kind of further along their career?
Yeah, I think we're ready to coin a new buzzword here. We'll call it omniquotient, right? If we have omnichannel, let's talk about omniquotient, which would be having all four of those, because there's different times, different things you're going to be doing, different projects you'll be working on, different people you'll be working with, where those different things need to come into play. And the idea is not that you have to possess them all and be the greatest at all of them in every situation. It's about building the teams and thinking about in your workflow the types of people and tools that you need to make sure that all those things are accounted for. There might be times where you need to lead more with the intelligence quotient, other times where it's much more about the emotional quotient. And again, that can be both in terms of your day-to-day work as a marketer, but then also in the marketing you put out into market and how you want to resonate with your audiences. And so just understanding what they are, being able to recognize them, and then start to do pattern recognition for where you can see each of them coming into play, who possesses them, how your audiences respond to them. You can then begin to work them to your advantage and put those pieces together into an omnichannel, omniquotient, omnipresent, omniscient. Any others we can throw in here?
And adaptive is the one that stands out to me. And what do you think being adaptive in terms of applying that to within marketing, but also that sort of quality as a CMO? Why is being adaptive something worth singling out?
It is so important right now, given how much change is happening in our world. Any given day, there's major things going on around us that are going to impact the work we do, our approach to that work, the people around us. And so being able to adapt, as the word says, in those situations and think about, all right, what do I need to do differently? You can't just continue to act the way that you did yesterday or the day before. For me, I know you've talked about people's superpowers with other guests on the podcast. And for me, this idea of adaptability stems from, in my mind, a lot of improv that I've done over the years, or freestyle. I've been known to freestyle rap when the inspiration strikes, and just that idea to kind of think on your feet, not be afraid to try and fail and learn. All of those are the components of success, I think, for an aspiring CMO.
For Aaron Goldman, marketing is about going big and going small. Go big with a Superbowl ad if you have the budget and want a wide reach, or get focused with programmatic ads to pinpoint your key prospects. Aaron says the best advertisers don't have all of the answers, but they are the best at trial and error, play and pivot, test and learn. He says traditional media and marketing still has its place, but the digital and social media marketing side of things, even now, are underrated. So be intelligent, be adaptive, be creative, be omniquotient, and most definitely have empathy in every ad you create. For Top CMO, I'm Ben Kaplan.